What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Ryan with the Roundtable of Wraith, and we're bringing you a familiar conversation here. I feel like we just did one of these, but I'm not going to complain at all. I can get used to talking about your successes. That's fine. Maybe eventually you'll interview me after I do something. But I am joined by Sam Dando, who just this weekend finished top four. I'm going to say third place, finished third place in the Calling Indianapolis. So, Sam, how has it been? Are you recovered from the weekend? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I'm very tired. I had to immediately come back to normal life and start my job and then do some other stuff that was going on. So it's been a really busy week. So I'm looking forward to finally sleeping this weekend. But it was a great experience. I'm really glad I went, regardless of the topping or anything like that. It was just a great event. It was really good to be with people and make some new friends and new connections. So I really enjoyed my time, but it was a really fun time. I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. You did not win the event, unfortunately, but some would say you claimed an even greater prize, and that was slowly evolving into the People's Champion. So how have you embraced your new title? And also, like, the Drip King, like, I saw a bunch of people just throwing stuff at you. So the People's Champion, I like that one. We'll stick there first, and then we'll talk about your fashion sense maybe a little bit later.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm in contention with Mr. Fino third counter on his tunic in black, considering all the memes that have been going on with that guy.
Yeah,
he's a funny dude. We fortunately had the chance to play in the event, and then I was really hoping that we'd get to meet each other again in the finals. But we've been talking a little bit after the event, and he's a funny guy. But
that's cool.
It's been cool. I've met a lot of great people. A lot of really cool people have DM'd me or messaged me to just ask questions about stuff, which I'm always very welcome to. But I just had a great time. With some moderate memeing, moderate trolling, but otherwise try to keep it pretty clean. You know, I want to make sure that the people get some good content along with some jokes. So
yeah, I heard about your endeavors trying to get a certain card signed. We'll talk about that certain card in a little bit, but I heard all about that.
Yeah.
That's funny. So before we dive into anything, I'm sure, you know, when we went to Vegas, it was fantastic and the experience was amazing. But I want to get just some perspective from you now topping an event, right? How was the weekend as a whole? How was were you nervous? Were you enjoying yourself? I mean, playing you, knowing you, I know your mannerisms at the table. So watching you on stream and just seeing the way that you were interacting, I could just be like, dude, he's having a blast right now. Which was really cool to watch. But just from your perspective, like, how was the event? And, how did you think of it?
So getting to experience my only other kind of bigger level event was Nationals in Orlando, which was run by Channel Fireball. And when I was at that event, I also played on stream twice, but they only got one game they put on stream. And I took Rhinar at that point, and I think I finished like 73rd or something. So it was still a good showing, but that event was different than this one. There was a couple of key differences in how they were run. I actually think I preferred the SGC of how they ran the event. It was very professional. There was only a few like weird things, like with the deck lists of being able to put them online, and like maybe with the vaccine verification, but all that went pretty smoothly. Otherwise, the judging staff was awesome. I really loved them, which was a contradiction from what I experienced at Channel Fireball. But like after all my streamed games, I was like fist bumping Dan, who is like the guy who is running everything behind the scenes, and then one of my favorite judges there, Matthew. Every game, I was like, "What's up, Matt?" He was just standing there in the back. So like really great relationship with the judges. They're all very professional, very nice, great experience. I just had a super fun time playing. I mean, recently, as I don't know if it's because it's like a maturity thing or as I'm getting older, I'm trying to just play the game as like a third party viewer. So rather than being invested in the game and getting upset, or when I'm playing, when things don't go my way, maybe just variance wise, getting upset or salty about it, I just try to view it as like a third party perspective where I'm just seeing the game unfold as it unfolds. And then thinking about, okay, the game is moving in this direction. How should I navigate the game? And that's just been serving me really well. I mean, between playing like that at the ProQuest and then playing here, not really caring about the outcome of the game necessarily, but just more so enjoying the game itself and the moments that happen within it, have just really allowed me to open up as a player and experience and enjoy those moments a lot more. And I loved playing on stream. I was super nervous at first, but by the end of the event, I think they had me up there like 6 times or something. They didn't show all the games. Unfortunately, some of the best games they didn't show. But by the end of it, I was more just natural, just being relaxed and enjoying playing with the players that I was playing against and having a good time. And I mean, like you said, you've played against me enough. So, I just like to have both players feel comfortable and enjoy the game and try to get out of our heads and just like enjoy the moment that we have together at that point, because I think that's like the best part. So I mean, you can see like in my game against Tyler Horspool that was on, I was laughing, and I know you couldn't hear what I was saying, but I was joking around and trying to keep it light. I hope I didn't offend him or anything like that. But
I could just I think it was against Horspool, the same game. It was just like the classic Sam where like you made a play and you're like arms folded, leg up, like facing off to the side. I'm like, dude, he's in the zone right now. This is like perfect. It was funny.
What was funny was when I did that, and that was the big Chanamont heroic turn.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting like that. Tyler was just looking at the board. He's like, yeah, if I was in your position, I'd be sitting like that too. And I'm like, oh, dude, I don't mean it like in an offensive way. I'm just trying to be chill and stuff. He's like, no, it's fine. But it's just like stuff like that. It's just it's a great experience, and I'm glad that I finally get to like open up as a player and get to test myself against some other high level players and see kind of where I was stacking up with them. And the results were pretty great in regards to that. So all in all, it was a really great experience as a player to mature and evolve, and also just to see how the practice or the skill that I've been trying to work on has applied to the rest of the field, basically, because I got to play against some really great players. So
yeah, you had a good, really nice laundry list of like really good, like Hamilton. I know you lost to him, but I mean, just playing against him, and then Tyler, who won Vegas. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I know you played Fino, you beat Fino, who was the runner-up. So like all these different people that you ended up playing along the way, which was, I mean, it's a solid list that you were building there, a little good resume. But no, it's cool.
Yeah, it was great. And they're all great people. That was like one of the best things too. Regardless of the games, they're all just really great experiences with really positive people. And I can say like after almost every game, I probably felt like I made a new friend, whether it was a friend or an acquaintance, how it went. I just had a great time seeing them throughout the rest of the event and asking them how they're doing, or they came up to me and asked, and it just felt like a very welcoming environment, which is a pretty different change of pace compared to most TCGs I've experienced.
Yeah,
I mean, especially
coming from Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, I mean, like very toxic environment.
Jesus.
So Flesh and Blood is a very interesting change of pace in that regard.
Yeah, I've never had a bad experience at the table. Unless I'm playing Jim, but that's a different video.
Friends can be salty.
Yeah, right. I am not immune to the salt either. Ask Levi about that. But yeah, so we'll. This is how the video is going to structure for those of you YouTube viewers that don't want to sit through however long this is going to be. So Sam's going to talk about his deck list, maybe some of the changes that he made. Might have a guest host here. Yep. What's up, Liv? Sorry, daughter here. Guest host. He's going to go over his deck list. He's going to go over some of maybe the changes. I know for those of you that are tuning into this one, you probably saw his ProQuest win, so not a lot of changes here, but some key ones that he wants to focus on. We're going to talk about the matchups, so he's going to run down the tournament, just things like that. And then I know a bunch of people have been reaching out, asking Sam specific questions. So we have those listed in a Google Doc. So I will ask Sam like kind of a Q&A session, if you will, towards the end of the video. So that's just kind of the structure that we're going to get. So first we're going to start with his deck list. And I know it's in there. I've seen it. I've been staring at it for a while here. And I like just Talishar the Lost Prince. Where is this the most important card in the deck, or like what's the
I mean, I attributed my top 4 to that card.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Gotten to the top tables if I didn't have that. That was the secret tech all weekend. People kept asking me, like, what's with your deck? Like, why are you winning as Briar? Why are you making it? Why? And I'm like, it's Talishar, man. That's why. It's because I run Talishar. Memes aside, that card never saw the table other than when I had people signing it.
Yeah, so I heard about that. Yeah.
The lore of that card is that my test partner Levi and we always kind of had the running joke where when we were trying to flesh out our sideboards, if we couldn't find like another spot, we're like, oh, we'll just throw Talishar in there. And so the night before this event, I had been testing out Pursuit of Knowledge, 2 of them, and I had come to the conclusion that like it just wasn't practical to use. I just could not find time when I would actually use the card or when I would want to side it in. So I took them out and I had 2 spaces open. So I put in 1 more Runic Reclamation just in case I happen to play into the Briar Mirror, because I think that card's really strong into Briar. And I'm like, well, I'll throw a Talishar in there. Why not? That'll just be fun, because who knows if I get to the top. And then Levi and I came up with the ploy where we're like, it's the Prism tech because you can kill auras and it doesn't get a rust counter.
Which is not true.
We're idiots, and that's actually not the fact either. So my whole like big brain scheme just didn't even work out. But day 2, we found a really great. I thought of a great idea before. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna just go up to like a bunch of players that I really respect or that I like, and I'm just gonna ask them if they could sign it for me, so I can by the end of the tournament just have like a nice collection of signatures on the Talishar. And I can put it in my binder as like a keepsake. So
that's cool.
That was really fun, and I'm going to cherish that now, just having it. I got like Michael Hamilton to sign it, and I got Brendan Patrick to sign it, and he signed Hayden Dale's name for me also, which was really funny. And then per my request, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so great, and Tyler Horsepool, which was nice. So yeah, just a lot of really great people, great sports, and I think it's the first top deck with a Talishar in it, so put that in the books.
I was gonna ask, like, I don't think, I mean, the funny thing about the Fab website too is that there are a lot of typos sometimes. Like sometimes they just have random cards, so people looking at your list are either going to think that you're just a super genius because it's like some tech that no one has tested yet, or that the website just misprinted it, and it's neither. You're literally just like doing it for the memes, which is hilarious.
Well, it's kind of like a hidden joke too, because as I've been testing Briar and stuff, everyone keeps asking like, oh, what's your tech? Like, how are you winning? It must be your deck. And this game, there's just people that are, it feels like very prone to just net decking stuff, or they just think that if they change their deck, it'll make their play patterns better, or they'll have better matchups. So it was kind of like a little hidden message to people, like, you know, don't just copy a deck and take it for whatever it is, you know, think about it a little bit. So I hope that nobody takes it and starts trying to play it. I didn't want that to happen, but if you do, try it out and let me know how it works. Levi and I were testing day 2, just warming up, playing some games, and I had it on the table acting like I was using it, but we were just using it as a thorn, but pretending that it was Talishar. So people were like walking by, like, what the heck is, like, why is he playing? What is going on?
Just doing double takes and stuff. Like, what the hell is happening? So, this kid made day 2.
Yeah, exactly. So but other than that, yeah, that's the secret tech, guys. Don't ever use it, though.
Don't use Talishar. Don't ever
use it.
So looking at the list here, I don't have a great memory, so I can't really tell what's different from the last time we spoke, but maybe you can just go over some, card choices that either you changed here, or another co-host is making some noise here. Go over some of the card choices and maybe some cards that really shined that maybe you didn't necessarily expect. Sorry about that.
So I think the only really big differences that I had in this list compared to my last one that you would notice would be Lead the Charge, which I put 2 in, and then the Amulet of Earth. I think those are really the only relevant sideboard changes or just new text that I put into the deck. Lead the Charge is sick. I was testing that card before when I was like not wanting to play Sonatas, just because I thought Sonatas were getting in the way of my lightning presses. So I had tested that card just in generic Briar, and I really liked how it worked. It just seemed that it was very consistent, but it didn't really raise the ceiling of the deck very much. But into Prism, you already have a pretty good matchup into Prism, but it can get to those scary parts where if they just happen to have the arc lights that line up with your Channelmot heroic turns, and they just get enough auras on the board that you just kind of start getting overwhelmed, you can get in a pretty bad situation. So I thought it was just going to be good in there to have, where I can arsenal it, and then when I have my Mount heroic turns, if they drop an arc light, it's like, all right, well, that's great, good for you, lead the charge, and then I can just blow through. Or if I need to clear 2 auras, I can do that as well. So I really loved that card. That was a sick tech for Prism. I'm really happy I sided that. And then Amulet of Earth, it didn't ever show up at that event really, but in testing, it performed really well. Just the one tech where you can just drop it and just let it sit on the board. And then you can set up really nice Force of Nature turn where you Force of Nature fuse, and then you're always threatening the +1 from the Amulet of Earth, so you can pop it if you need to get your card over the breakpoint, or then you can get all of your cards forcibly up with attack, so they can all get a draw from Force of Nature. So didn't come up at the tournament, but it was pretty relevant in my testing where I figured it was still good to just have the one of, and I probably would keep it. I really like it in the board, and again, there's situations where you have it in your hand, you're like, okay, well, I kind of wish I could block, but otherwise it's just another non-attack action card with Go Again that you can play to create an embodiment of lightning or something like that. But other than that, the deck is still pretty much the same. I think I said in my last ProQuest video that like there wasn't really much I was going to change with the deck anyway. It was already pretty optimized for this meta, and that didn't really change. If anything changed, it was more my skill and my matchup knowledge and my ability to play the deck rather than the deck itself, which I think is more important overall.
I did see you hit that off of Ravenous Rabble on stream, which...
Oh, of course. That's a classic Sam.
I didn't realize you only had one, which is now even more funny because like I saw that happen. I'm like, oh, Amulet Earth, that sucks. And now knowing that you only have one, which is like, it's just classic. Just your luck when it comes to this game. So, you know, just generalize, right? So the list is pretty much the same. Not much has changed. Channel Mount Heroic, it's like, I feel like it's very easy for you, or for this deck to be considered a Channel Mount Heroic Briar list, right? But I feel like it's a lot more than that. Like a lot of times, you know, Force of Nature is the best card in the deck. Like, how would you describe this style of Briar? I mean, because it's not quite Cheerios, it's not quite just Channel Mount Heroic, cheap Go Agains, even though you have those elements in there. How would you describe this deck as a whole?
So the deck, I would say I play it like a mid-range aggro deck, kind of like I said before, but it consists of pockets. So the deck has various play lines that you can go through as the game develops, or depending upon the hands that you draw, because given the variance of the attacks and then the balance with the non-attacks and then with the earth relevancy with Channel Mount Heroic, as every game plays out a little bit differently, but you have similar lines that you kind of know how to play through. So I usually want to try to pace the game out to a point where I'm always presenting some kind of aggression or some kind of threat to my opponent, so they're constantly feeling a pressure. But obviously, I'm trying to build up for my really big turns. So once I get into my extremely explosive Channel Mount Heroic turns, or the Force of Nature turns, or any really 5-card hand, like Briar just explodes with a 5-card hand. So I'm always trying to set up for those turns. Some people have called it a combo deck. Some people have called it an aggro deck. Some people have called it mid-range. Like, I don't know. I mean, it kind of goes through all of those different cycles depending upon your matchup or how the deck is drawing throughout that course of the game. So I'm always just trying to set up for optimal explosive turns and then make sure I'm always pressuring my opponent. Because Briar's rewarded for being aggressive. Once you start kind of slowing tempo or blocking a lot or not really being the one on the forefront of the tempo, that's when the deck kind of starts to, it doesn't crumble, but it does, you can't have more than a few of those turns throughout the course of the game, because if you're just not the one on the front of the gas, the deck kind of just gets in a bad situation, at least how I play the deck. So Force of Nature turns are great, but sometimes Force of Nature is just another non-attack action that you need to get an embodiment of lightning. Sometimes it's just a +1 that you want to get an attack, so it makes a more awkward breakpoint. Channel Mount Heroic sometimes only stays around for 1 turn. Sometimes it stays around for 3 turns. You know, it just kind of depends on how you're drawing throughout the course of the game and how you're wanting to set up your turns. I'm always trying to think at least like 1 or 2 turns ahead of where I want to push my tempo to where I can break out the game. Ultimately, once I have like a big Channel Mount Heroic turn, I most likely want to be winning at that point. So either I'm going to win that turn, or it puts me in a winning position, or I'm going to be winning like in a couple turns after that. Because once they get low on health, Briar just kind of can beat them down unless she bricks. So I don't know. Just depends on what the matchup is and how the deck draws, and it can vary between different play styles. So that's what I like about it a lot too.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like if you're unfamiliar with the deck, right, and you're trying to pick up Briar for the first time, and like you're watching Sam stream games, I feel like the announcers were like, oh, it's a Channel Mount Heroic deck, it's a Channel Mount Heroic deck. And while it is, I feel like it's just so much more than that. Like playing against it, watching you play it, stuff like that. Like there's so many intricate lines. It's not just slam heroic, play 0 costs, and then profit. It's a lot of, you know, setup and taking these alt lines. And a lot of times, like Force of Nature, like I said, is kind of like the big card. Like that might be the card that wins you the game that time. It's not necessarily always reliant on Mount Heroic. So
yeah, I mean, some games Force of Nature is that big block card. Sometimes it's a 4 block. Like that's super relevant. Yeah. Same with Mount Heroic. Sometimes Mount Heroic is that buff card. Sometimes it's a 4 block, which can be really relevant. I mean, don't get me wrong. I wish all my games were drop heroic, play 3-0 attack cards, because that would make my life a lot easier. But that's just not the realistic play pattern of the deck anymore. It just doesn't consistently do that. So, unfortunately.
Cool. For sure. All right. So, any parting thoughts on this deck list? If you guys want like an in-depth analysis, check out his ProQuest win video that we have on this channel, because we kind of tackle the cards a little bit more in depth, and since most of them are the same, like he mentioned, it's really not worth going over card for card. I will also post a list or a link in the description of the video, so if you want a link to that, you can take a look at it. But Sam, any parting thoughts on the list, or any cards that really shone, or things that you didn't like, something like that?
Yeah, there was one comment that I saw on Facebook, which I thought was very eloquent in the way that it wrapped up kind of how it described the deck. People were asking like, oh, I can't wait to see his list. I can't wait to see what he was playing. And someone said, his list actually isn't even that amazing, but his play style is. His matchup play is substantially good. I liked watching his games. So I thought that wrapped it up really well, because I always say that people are asking about the deck, and I'm like, it's just a Briar deck. Like, the deck is not anything crazy. There's nothing really amazing in the deck. It's just an optimized Briar deck that fits my play style really well. And it's more so about how I play my matchups and how I play the deck rather than the deck itself, which I would recommend to any player. Again, my variant of the deck might not be the most optimal way that you play the deck or how it fits your play style. This is just optimized for me and how I like to play the deck and how I like to just play the game, generally speaking. So take that with a grain of salt. If you take the deck and you start playing it and it performs really well for you, that's awesome. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from people all over the world. I've gotten people from Australia and I can't even remember some of the other Asian countries that have messaged me saying I topped with your deck or I won with your deck, and that's awesome. But if it doesn't work for you because there's certain cards that you just don't quite understand how they work, just keep that in mind. Like, it's how I like playing the deck. So do with it like you want. If you want to change stuff, or if it doesn't work for you, be my guest, and then let me know what you change, because I'd love to know how people want to approach the deck so I can get better as well and learn new things.
Awesome, for sure. All right, so you want to run down the tournament, some matchups, things like that? I feel like I'm going to take a...
So the event itself, I only played against the Trinity. I didn't get any rogue matchups. The only other matchup that I played outside of the Trinity was Chain, and that was Cody Williams in my last round.
Oh, yeah.
But otherwise, I think I played... And my number might be slightly skewed, but I think in my 12 rounds of Swiss, I played 2 Viserai, 4 Starvo, and then 6 Prism. It was like 5 or 6 Prism or something Prism. Like that.
That's the dream.
So, actually, well, the dream was day 2, because day 1 I only got 1 Prism, I think, and then it was 4 Starvo. I believe it was Prism, Viserai, and then 4 Starvo.
Jeez.
I beat 3 of the Starvos, and then I lost that last one on stream that you saw. And then day 2, when I made it to the top tables, all the Prism players that were eating the Starvos were all at the top tables.
Of course.
So then I got to feed on the Prisms at that point.
So
that's where all my Prisms came in on day 2. But day 1, I started my day against a Prism player, which I sat down. I'm like, oh, this should be nice. I can get started with some Prism, get some more reps in on that. And that game went really well. I can't remember too many details about the game just because it was the first one. But great guy. His name was Connor. I really enjoyed the game. And then round 2, I played against Kyle Jones, who's from the TCG guys.
Okay.
Really great guy. I saw him, and I'm like, he was wearing a TCG guy sweater. I'm like, I don't know if that's him, but maybe. And so we started playing. He was on Viserai. And I've been talking to some people. It's really weird with the Viserai matchup, because some people say it's horrible for Briar. You just instant lose against the Viserai matchup. Some people say it's a really great matchup for Briar, and then other people say it's about a 50-50. I'm more inclined to be in the 50-50 range. It really just depends. If they go mid-range aggro into me, I think it's about a 50-50, maybe slightly favored my way. If they go OTK, like straight OTK, I think it leans in Viserai's favor at that point, but nobody's really doing that right now.
Yeah, right.
So we had a really cool game. He made some really cool play lines. Like there was one where he played a Swarming Gloomveil just raw, and then he played his creepers to play Read the Ruins, which was really cool. And then it gave his Swarming Gloomveil go again and all the
modes.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool line.
All the modes.
That was cool. And he actually played 2 Revel and Runebloods throughout the course of that game, which was brutal. But one of the things, again, he didn't play any Arcane Barrier against me. So I was kind of
I learned that
down with the Arcane. Yeah, which is something also, I guess, about the deck, is that it surprisingly does more Arcane than people would think it does. And there was quite a few people at that event that got punished by that, by not playing Milrune, because they just took so much Arcane. But that game was really close. I think we both got down to like 2 health or something, and it ended with the classic Viserai, where he had switched to like a more semi-OTK strategy about midway through the game once I kind of started gaining tempo on him, and he built up like 11 rune chants or something like that, I believe, and I was at 18 health, and then he swung at me with the Swarming Gloomveil with the 11 rune chants, and he had 1 card in Arsenal, and I'm like, okay, well, the only card that he could have in Arsenal that would kind of punish me would be a Revel in Runeblood, but he played one like 1 or 2 turns ago, so I was like, I don't know. It could be Revel, but it's probably not. And so I took all the Arcane because I was trying to get my health below him. At that point, he was at 6. So I was trying to get below him so he couldn't Skullcap block my Arcane damage. And then he flips the Revel, and I'm like, oh no. He had the Revel, so I was able to block it out to go to 4, so he couldn't block Arcane at that point. And then I got him down to 2. And then he had the classic Viserai. After you throw for your semi-OTK, he
just nothing. Yep, you're just bricked.
Yep, the full red whiff. And he swung at me, and I just blocked it so I could go to 1, so he couldn't block anything. And then that was just game at that point because I could Thorn him and Rune Chant him. But a super great game, super awesome guy. We were talking all throughout the event, and one of my favorite games of the weekend for sure.
That's cool.
So then after that, I went into the Starvo train. I played against 2 Starvos back to back. The first one was Charles, and then the second one was Peter. They were both great guys as well. Those games were just pretty honest games. Again, no like crazy Starvoing that really happened. It was like a pretty just cool games to play. That my normal Starvos, like if you wanted to learn more about how I approach that matchup, I would probably watch my ProQuest video just so we don't have to like go too much into detail about that. But then after that, it looks like round 5, I actually played another Prism, which was Ethan. And then again, that Prism matchup went pretty straightforward. My Prism, I actually haven't dropped a game against Prism on my Briar list yet, so that I know of. I think I've gotten pretty close, but I think I haven't dropped a game against Prism yet.
And yeah, you've always said that's your favorite matchup.
Oh yeah, no, and I love playing it. It's like a really fun matchup for me to play too, because you basically pace the game out where you swing damage and then run aura management on the board with your Thorn at your turn, so you're still presenting damage and then just kind of keeping the board state clean until you hit a Mount Heroic turn. And then once you drop Mount Heroic, Prism pretty much just crumples at that point.
You just don't care about auras either?
Yeah, my Tyler Horspool game, I think that was like an ideal like just Prism game. It's just like that's how they usually go in terms of just it starts off slowly managing the board state and presenting damage, and then when Heroic comes out, it's just like I ignore any of the auras and I just go for lethal at that point and try to run him over. And then my next game was against Dwayne, who's a really great guy who was playing Starvo, who unfortunately showed up to the match late, and so the judge had to enforce the IP4 penalty on him, which I still strongly don't like that, even though they changed it to an IP4 from an IP5, which I still don't understand their concept of like how that's not going to help prevent someone from getting an instant game loss. And then to make it worse, that was like my high roll game of the day, like the most insane high roll. Start off with Mount Heroic turn 1 and then play double Force of Nature into like all these attacks, and I'm just drawing cards like crazy. So really unfortunate, but really nice guy. We talked for a bit after the game, and he came from Magic. We talked about draft and stuff like that. So I hope I see him again at other events. Really good player too. And then round 7, which you guys could have saw on stream, that was against Pat, and that was just a blowout Starvo game. I mean, there was like literally nothing I could do. He had every answer.
He was laughing the whole time. Yeah,
I was just enjoying getting blown out. So at that point, I finished day 1 6-1, and my last game was my only loss.
You were 5th overall after day 1.
Yeah, I finished fifth seed after day one. And now I'm actually remembering Ethan, who was my Prism matchup. He was the first guy that I played on stream, but they had me on the secondary table, and they never showed that game, which was probably for the best because we were both kind of nervous being on stream, and we're playing super sloppy. Like, we both messed up so many times, but it was like a good kind of initiator. And then after getting blown out on stream against Pat, that kind of like, I was like, all right.
Got rid of the nerves, like who cares at that point? Yeah.
So going into day two, I started my day with a Prism, which when I came up to the top table, I'm like, oh, this is nice. I get like a nice little warm-up game into Prism. This guy's name was Jackson, super nice guy. He had the sickest Lexi mat I've ever seen. And I'm like, how did you get that mat? I want Levi to know how to get that mat. And apparently his game store commissioned the actual artist that did the art for Lexi to make them like their own playmat. So dope playmat. Jackson, if you watch this and you know how to get us a playmat, please let me know because I want one of those playmats for my boy Levi. But also really nice guy. After the game, I felt really bad because it sucks like going into day two and then having to sit down against a dirty Briar player that just happened to made it to the top tables and is just like wiping out the Prism.
You're just like, so, oh God.
Yeah, I felt bad, but you know that's what I came there to do, right? I came there to farm Prisms, so
yeah,
it happened. And then the next guy that I played against was Tanner. Super awesome guy too. We also played on stream, but it was on the secondary channel, so you probably don't get. I don't know if they're probably not going to show that game. But he was on Viserai, and oddly enough, again with the different opinions for the matchup, I guess we sat down. He saw I was playing Briar, and he's like, "Oh, Briar, I hate that matchup." He's like, "That's like a bad matchup for me." I'm like, is it? He's like, yeah, in my experience, I haven't been able to really beat a Briar. And I'm
it's
like,
weird how like polarizing that is.
Yeah, which I don't understand if it's just experience in terms of the players that you've played against,
right,
or the like the ability of comfortability with the matchup. I don't know. But that game was really cool, like a really cool game. I wish I could watch it back because I did some really interesting play lines that I've actually never done with the deck before. Like I had to use an Autumn's Touch at one point with Go Again to present because my bricked hand. But I had like a Sting of Sorcery and a Rune Chant, and I swung for 8, and he was at like 3 health or something. So I was presenting the 2 instances of Arcane, and he didn't have no rune, so we had to like awkwardly try to block the Arcane with the 8 damage and then the Thorn. So that was really cool. I wish I could see that on stream, but I got there. Again, another really close game, but I got that one. And then I played round 8. Oh, I'm sorry, not round 8. That was round 10. Then that was the Tyler Horspool game. So you can watch that one on stream if you want to watch that. Again, that one was pretty like classic Briar Prism matchup. Really fun game. The commentators, when I was watching it back, it seemed like they were kind of confused about some of the lines that I took sometimes, or like why I just passed turn. What I don't think was communicated really properly was that in the Prism matchup as Briar, if you have a floating action and you don't want them to drop an aura on you, or you feel the threat that it might drop a Genesis, you can pass priority, and then if they play an aura, you retain your action point, and then you can destroy that aura. So a lot of that game, I was just trying to maintain control of the board state. So like when the commentators were like, oh, he's just passing, or he must be happy with his turn or something, that was what was going on most of the time.
Yeah, like you.
Because if Tyler kept his hand, I didn't want the fear of him dropping an aura. But if he plays an aura, he doesn't have enough cards in hand to drop an aura, I'll threaten him at that point.
Sure.
Right? So, and then
I want to say I want to say on that too. Sorry to interrupt you. I remember watching that on stream, and I forgot like Levi hadn't reached out or whatever. So I see that you're on stream, and it says that you're 9-2. So like I'm like, dude, he's got like I didn't realize that. I think
I was 7-2.
Yeah, so it said 7-2, but you were actually 8-1, right? And so I remember sweating. I'm like, dude, if he drops this, man, he's not going to make top cut. So like I'm sitting there not knowing that you're safe, and I'm like shit my pants like, okay, he's got this. It's Prism. I know it's Horspool, but it's still Prism. Like he's got to win. And I remember you won, and I was like so relieved. And then Levi's like, yeah, he's 10-1 or something. I'm like, what do you mean? Like I was just like sweating for the last like half hour watching this game, and he's 10-1. So yeah.
And then you told me that, and then I was like, what the heck?
I wanted you to check your matchups. Yeah, I wanted you to check your matchups.
Yeah. So I checked my gem account and everything was cool. But then I went up to Dan, who was the guy who was like coordinating the streams and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, Dan, my friend told me that I was put at this record on stream, but it shows this. I just want to make sure everything everything's cool.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, they compile all the records through like a spreadsheet. And sometimes when it auto-generates, it produces an incorrect record.
Okay.
He's like, but I'll make sure I talk to them about that so they can correct it. So they corrected it at that point. So again, like super cool people, like really nice staff. But yeah, that game was cool. I think my favorite moment of that game, which doesn't come across on the stream, but when I presented the snatch for 7, and then he with my Mount Heroic out, and he blocked for 6. And they're all like, "Oh, he's gonna break his snap. This is the turn he breaks snap."
Oh, the parable one, right?
I looked at the board and I just started laughing. I said to Tyler, I'm like, "Oh, you're a good player. That's a great play." No reaction. Pass priority. And that's why I just kind of sat back and looked at him, because I had saw that he had a card in his soul. So I presumed he was just going to use Aura effect to create a Spectral Shield to block for the 7. But then he dropped the Parable. And I'm like, even better. I even played into that even better. And so I was really having a good time with that one. And then when I listened to the commentators back, I'm like, they don't get it. They don't know what's going on.
They had no idea what was happening.
Yeah. The other great play that I don't know if it came across, but with the Swarming Gloomveil, when I just played the raw Swarming Gloomveil for 3, and then Tyler asked me, he's like, "Oh, if this hits and it creates an embodiment of Earth, does it gain to go again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it does," which the commentators got right in that moment. But then I knew that he had a Soul Shield. I just had to read that he had the Soul Shield, and so I'm like, all right, well, if I Swarming him for 3, and he doesn't block with Soul Shield, I had the Lightning Press. I'm like, I'm just going to drop Lightning Press and try to bait out the Soul Shield, or he'll get punished. And he blocked for 3, Lightning Press, and then he Soul Shielded. And you can see me smiling and getting really happy again, because then they're like, "Oh, he got blocked." And I'm like, no, that's exactly what I wanted from him.
Needed it out, yeah.
So yeah, that was just a really cool game. And just the interaction with Tyler after the game, I'm like, "Hey, dude, I don't want to be like a jerk or anything, but can you sign my Talishar? Like, it's nothing against you. Like, I respect you as a player, and I just want to know if you can sign my Talishar." He's like, "Yeah, dude, I got you." Really, really cool guy. Really great game. That was probably also one of my favorite games of the event for sure.
That's awesome.
So, and then after that one, I played into
Cody, right?
No, the next one was against Fino then.
Oh.
So then round 11 was Fino. He was the only undefeated, and I think I was at that point like almost 2nd seed or probably 3rd or 4th seed. And again, that game was played on stream, but on the secondary. So they recorded the game, but they didn't show it, which unfortunately also that game was crazy.
How do they lose?
All my great games, they didn't do it.
Yeah, how do they lose all those VODs? Like they exist. Like they should just upload all the side tables, just upload them all.
I hope they do, because that game, I mean, it's not going to have commentary, but that's fine.
So what?
That dude was running so hot all day. Like, he went first, and he dropped Genesis Haze Bending turn 1. And I was like, and he's like, "Man, I just keep doing this all day." I'm like, "Well, that's great for you.
Sick.
That's great." Yeah. And so I had lead the charge. So I went lead the charge, destroy Haze Bending, and then destroy his Genesis. So I'm like, all right, whatever. I lost some tempo, but at least I got that done. And then he drops like another aura after that. I'm like, this is going great. And he just had so much tempo at that point. He had a point where he had 2 Haze Bendings out on the board, and I just couldn't deal with everything. And then he had a Merciful that dropped. And then I just got to the point where I had a Heroic, and I just took like a bunch of damage. I'm like, all right, I'm setting up for my kill turn. I'm just going to go crazy after this. So I presented like a ton of damage to him, and I brought him down. Yeah, he went from 28 to 19 to 16. And then he dropped a Parable or something like that, I believe. And he had no cards in hand. I'm like, okay, I'm about to go off now. He has no cards in hand. I'm just going to try to kill him. And so I presented all this damage. I went for a Rabble. And of course, it's the same Dando Classic. It reveals a blue. And I'm like, I really needed it to be 7 damage. No, I had a Heroic.
Oh, okay.
It was 5, but I really needed it to be 7. So it hit him. And then he ultimately went down to, it says 5 health here, but I think I remember he went down to 3. And he didn't have anything generated at that point because he only had 1 card in hand, so he couldn't really do anything. I think he created like a Spectral Shield or something, and I had the Runic Reclamation in hand. Oh. And I'm like, I go Force of Nature, Fuse, pitch my Blue Earth to create a Rune Chant, Runic Reclamation for 11 and a Rune Chant. And I just sit back and I'm like, all right, either he can't have all blocks in his hand. There's got to be some auras, and I had calculated it because he had enough spectral shields, I think, where I couldn't die from him having a like double merciful or a merciful with Ode or something, because I was at 8 health, and he was only able to block like enough to where he couldn't not die. So like there's only still enough damage to kill him, the 3 damage, and he had played the what's the gloves that you pay 1 and the
Ironhide, yeah.
Yeah, he played Ironhide gauntlets and instead of Nullrune again. So and at the end of the game he was like, man, maybe I should have played Nullrune and I probably would have won. I'm like, well, but you wouldn't have had your gauntlets and you wouldn't have been able to block that 2 damage that I presented you. So he had a interesting play line where instead of dropping the second haze bending, he could have played a shimmers, which ultimately might have been the better line because he could have kept threatening me with the aura then at that point. But he was so far ahead that whole game, I thought I was probably going to drop it, but I was able to steal it back from him. So I wish that game was on stream.
Yeah, that would have been a cool one. That would have been a cool one to watch, yeah.
Yeah.
Did Hamilton run AB against you? Or did he just run Crown?
I think he did. I'm pretty sure he ran Boots. I think he had Nullrune Boots against me.
Okay.
Yeah, he knew what he was doing.
So no one else did, but yeah.
Yeah, no. And what was funny with Hamilton was he was kind of like my, not like nemesis, but rival throughout the tournament. Like we were always at the top tables, but we kept dodging each other. Like we didn't get to play, and he was so scared because he's like, man, this guy, he keeps winning. He's still around me. I don't know what the heck he's doing. And I'm like, Hamilton, don't watch my deck. Don't watch me play.
He's like, taking mental notes. Yeah, he's like memorizing your cards.
Round 7, when I was playing against the Prism player, he was next to me and he got deck check. And so they were just waiting as we were playing, and he was just watching my game like, look away, Michael.
You should have put you should put a folder up like you're in elementary school. Like, hey man, this is our game.
Yeah, super. Like, I love Michael. He's such a nice guy. I think it was like round 5 or round 6 or something. Again, we were nearby each other. We were right next to each other. And he sat down against this Kano player that was like 5-0 or something at that point. And I fortunately was able to dodge the Kano, but they had to go play on stream, which again, didn't get put on stream. It was the secondary game.
How can you not get Kano on stream?
I don't know. They kept putting me up there. They kept heading other great people up there, but they just, I don't know. They had so many great games that they just didn't get to put on stream, which I guess was the only thing I wish they could have done, but I don't know. I mean, I'm not the one like running production or something. So. Yeah. But as he was walking away, I'm like, Michael, take out the Kano. I can't deal with the Kano. You got to take out the Kano for me, man. And then he comes back. I'm like, did you beat the Kano? He's like, yeah, I beat the Kano. I go, oh, that's great. You're running like Nullrune 3 or something, right? He's like, no, I only have Nullrune 1 in my deck. I'm like, how did you win? He's like, he drew really bad.
Jesus. That's so funny.
The dude's got the luck or something.
The champion, that's the championship quote.
And they just draw horrible or something.
He drew bad.
I don't know what he's got.
AB won. He drew bad.
Yeah. Super nice guy though. Like I was so happy to play our game. I just wish it had gone. I wish it was like a better game.
Sure.
I'll get to that later. But so final match is sit down against Cody, who is on Chain, and he's a really good Chain player. And Chain was one of the matchups I was scared of because Chain is a really bad matchup for Briar, especially now. He's just so explosive. He's so fast. He can put out so much damage. So there's only like a handful of particular play lines that you can do that might help your situation that I've discovered at least. I know one in contention right now, or that people are discussing. It's like, do you go first or does Chain go first?
Yeah, that's a big question.
In my testing, I have found that going second was better. I know it's an unpopular opinion from a lot of people. They are like, no, you should never let Chain go first. But my reasoning for that is the game is not a matter of who can make meaningful decisions or who can set up for a better late game. It's a matter of who can put out the most damage and make the first person block. Whoever has to start blocking is going to lose. And Chain has the inherent advantage of having a secondary
Husk,
hand.
Yeah.
So he has Husk and he has his banishing card, so he's just going to be ramping up. So you have to try to kill him within 5-6 turns, maybe.
Yeah.
So by going second, you're the first one to be able to attack. Because if he goes first, you can use your hand to block, and then you get to draw back up, and then he has to choose whether he wants to block your attack. And then if he does, he's going to negate his turn. So being the first one on the offense allows you to be put in the position to aggress and make them block. I knew this. I didn't know if Cody had knew that or how comfortable he was with the matchup. As soon as the game started, I won the dice roll, so I chose to go second. He set up. He was able to puncture through like 5 damage to me or something. I had a pretty weak hand. I presented damage, and he was immediately like, no block. I'm like, okay, Cody knows what he's doing. He knows exactly how this matchup's going to go. And he was drawing really well. He was throwing out like minnowisms, and he had all this damage. And I knew within the first 2 turns that it was over at that point. So I was guaranteed top 8 at that point. He was on the bubble, so he needed to win that game to make it to top 8. And it was just a clean win on his end. There was nothing I could really do in regards to the variance of what had happened within that game. But I was just hoping I didn't have to see him again in top 8, or that he would get knocked out before then, because I knew that was going to be a bad game if I had to play him in top 8. So, after that wrapped up, I finished second seed, so I was right behind Fino. And I fortunately got to play, or unfortunately, I guess, my round 1 was against Jacob Bowe, who was actually a mutual friend within one of our main testing circles. I hadn't had the pleasure of getting to play against him yet, but I had just heard his name. I knew he was a good player. But then I knew he was playing Prism, so I'm like, okay, this is great. I couldn't ask for a better, round 1 into my top 8. Again, that game wasn't put on stream, but it was a really great game. I had a lot of really good decision points in regards to how I played the matchup. And he was unaware of how the Swarming Gloomveil ruling works, where when it hits, it gains go again. I did the same thing. I lightning pressed it, and it hit, and it gained go again. And he had to call a judge because he's like, that shouldn't work. The head judge ruled that it did, though. And so that kind of punished him a little bit. And then he was a little tilted at that point, and I had another time where I attacked with a lightning surge with go again for 4, and then I passed priority, and then he created a spectral shield, and then I just swung with Thorn, and then he had to block with a card from hand. So it's just like the basic play patterns, or like the really good matchup knowledge, just kind of eked me out there. But I started with a pretty early Mount Heroic turn as well, so it just kind of went in my favor from the beginning. And again, it's just a favored matchup. So unfortunately, he had to play against me round 1. But that was just kind of like the story of day 2. It was like all the people,
all prisms, yeah.
Nobody wanted to play against Briar. It was really funny with Fino when we sat down, because Cody Williams was sitting at the table next to me. And Fino looks over, he's like, thank God I don't have to play against you. He's like, you were the only one I was afraid of. And then he looks at me, he's like, what are you playing? And I'm like, I'm playing Briar. And he goes, oh my gosh, no way. How are you here? I'm like, I don't know, man. So that was pretty funny. That was everyone's reaction when I sat down at those top
tables.
Like,
Briar, what?
Yeah, they all just stopped for a second. They're like, how did
you were the only Ellen in the top cut. The only Briar day 2.
Yeah, so pretty cool. And then we got to play against Michael, which, like I had said, I'd been looking forward to that game like through the whole.
Finally met up.
Can't wait to play against Michael. Like, this is gonna be great.
Yeah.
And I knew I had a really clean shot too, because I just had to get through that game, and then I was probably gonna play against Fino, and I knew he couldn't high roll me twice as great as he had done before, so I figured I had it pretty locked. But that's when my deck just imploded. It was probably, not even exaggerating, like to just try to copium on the match itself. That was probably the worst I think I've drawn with the deck. Like in the last 3 months of the hundreds of games that I've played with it, that was probably the worst I've ever drawn with the deck. I drew like 2 all attack action hands back to back. You can see in the stream, like when he plays the Glacial Footsteps, and I just
throw your hand
really fast, and the judges or the commentators were like, "Oh, that was so confident. How do you do that?" It was just because I'm like, "This is a trash
hand.
Yeah. It's like I throw it away. It's just a trash hand." And I think the one card, I could be wrong, I feel like the one card I saved was a Channel Mount Heroic, because I drew an early Channel Mount Heroic. I'm like, this is great, but I could not find the blue earth. So I drew like the all attacks. I think I arsenaled the heroic or something like that. And then it took me a couple cycles to find the blue earth. And then I was able to set up that really awesome turn where it was Channel Mount Heroic. I was able to create the embodiment of lightning. And then the card that I arsenaled was a Force of Nature. So I'm like, okay, into the control matchup, this is exactly what I need. I just need to draw some attacks. And then I draw another Force of Nature, and then like the Revel, and then the one attack, and I was like, this is it. The game's over at this point. This isn't helping me out. And so that was a really underwhelming turn. And then I drew, I think after that, it might have been that turn or the next one. Once I drew this hand, this is when I knew the game was over. It was Nimblism, Sting of Sorcery. and I just looked at my hand. I said to Hamilton, I'm like, you got this game, dude. I'm like, my deck is not I'm like, this is so bad. And then I blocked with the 1 Nimblism and the Sting to block the hammer. And I was just looking at a dead hand. I could not draw attacks at that point because my first 2 hands were all attacks. And now I was cycling through all my non-attacks. And then after that, I drew a hand. It was double Blue Autumn's Touch, and then like some other crappy cards. And I mean, you can see because I was throwing away to block, and I was just trying to make do with what I had. And then I had the other Mount Heroic in the arsenal, and then I drew a relatively decent hand. And then he plays the Channel Lake Frigid on me, and I was just like, yeah, this isn't lining up for me at all, unfortunately. So kind of unfortunate, but throughout the whole tournament, I can't complain. My variance for just matchups and my variance for how my games went was very favored, so it was just my time. It wasn't up to me. I don't think... I mean, I've watched the game back a few times. There might have been a couple different mindset changes or things that I could have maybe tried to do to advance my game state or put me in a more optimal situation, but my draws were just so
I was going to say, I can't...
It was... I think what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to play test some games and ask Levi to just stack my deck like that, or just make it really bad for me, just so I can run through some hands like that, just to see how I can try to play out of it a little bit better. So I'll probably be testing that just to see, because that's just one of the inherent issues with the deck. And I've struggled with like small variants of that, but not
like that
degree of where it was just super stacked really poorly. So... I was really happy for Michael, though. I was really rooting for him. I loved both Fino and Michael, but I really was hoping that he would be able to pull through. So I was really happy when we were driving back home and we saw that he got the win. And I've talked to him a little bit now after, so we're going to be having our rematch soon. We're going to be playing some games probably just to get him ready for the Pro Tour and stuff. So I'm looking forward to just getting to play a little bit more and hopefully get some better games into him as well, where it's not as bad on my end. We'll actually get to play a bit. So
yeah, I'm curious to see. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'm curious to see, like, if you run that matchup back, like, I know he plays such a different style. It's more defensive. It's kind of like a combo between, like, Kale's list and, like, the, casino deck. So I'm curious, like, if you feel there is maneuvering there, or is it just, like, a bad deck or a bad matchup for you?
I mean, so one of my, so Marcus, who's one of my playtest partners, he's been playing OG Bravo, and he just goes full fatigue strategy into me. So I felt very prepared into a fatigue strategy. I know what my lines are, and I know how to have to play through that. And Starvo doesn't have the same utility that, like, Bravo does in some regard in terms of being able to just block out. So I felt pretty prepared. I mean, that's why I set up that heroic turn the way I did with Embodiment of Lightning and the Force of Nature, because I'm like, this turn's going to be huge. Like, this is going to win me the game. And then I just drew, like, the Coax of Commotion or whatever, and that was it. So, but that's kind of how you have to win those matchups.
Sure.
So I am looking forward to playing it a little more. On Friday, before the event, we were playing some side events, and I got to play against Michael Fang a bit. And he was playing a Starvo list that was very similar to Michael Hamilton's. And I beat him at that game. Again, it was a little sloppy on both of our ends, but after the game, he had talked to me a little bit. He said, maybe you should run Tunic just because you can generate more resources. So when I sat against Hamilton and we were looking at each other's deck lists, I'm like, should I run Tunic? Maybe I should run Tunic. I'm like, but I've had so much more practice with Scaletta.
Right.
I just feel more confident with that. So I was thinking about that too after the game. Like, if I ran Tunic, I wonder if that would have made a difference. And it might have in regards to, like, playing around Frostbites maybe, or being able to just at least swing with the Thorn. But my hands were so awkward, I don't even know if I would have had that opportunity. And the reason why I play Scaletta into Starvo rather than Tunic is because it allows me to maintain hands that I like, that I can pop off on rather than have to give up cards from my hand. So when I have the Scaletta, you have to think of it as like I can block Hammer twice without having to use a card from my hand, because I can block one time with both my Skullcap and then one of the other armor pieces, and then I can block with those other armor pieces and then the Scaletta again to block a Hammer. And then after that, if not, I can still block hammers with one card from hand and then with the armor itself, which can really maintain your turns when you're trying to pop off without having a Frostbite.
Sure.
And then it could also save you against like a big Spinal Crush or something like that. So it just really helps you maintain your really strong hands. against a deck that has a lot of disruption that can mess that up. So that's the mindset, and that's why I run Scaletta, and that's given me a lot of success. But it's something I'll definitely test. I mean, maybe after, if I'm playing some more games with Michael or with Fang or anybody else, I might just test some games with Tunic just to see how that's going to go. But after April 5th, that might not be as relevant if Starvo isn't
I was going to say, that kind of takes us to our Q&A session here. So a lot of Discord users have reached out to you with questions, and we've compiled a list. So we're going to, I'm going to glance through and talk about some of them right here. And the first one right here is from Mighty Scoop. What are some changes to your deck, if any, if, let's say, Starvo does get banned or severely nerfed? I feel like this might become like a top meta deck once again. I can't imagine that your showing is going to, somehow lessen the amount of people that are playing Briar. It's probably going to inspire a bunch of people to start running her. But let's say Starvo gets banned. Do you make a lot of changes to your deck? I mean, just looking at your deck and discussions with us, you don't run unmovables. You don't run like a defense reaction package. It's not like you're over teching for that matchup specifically. So I'm curious, like, is there anything in there that you would change specifically, or is it kind of just, this is my deck, this is how I want to run it?
No, I probably wouldn't. The only things I would maybe do is change some flex picks to optimize whatever the next deck that comes out that might be either targeting me. So if Briar does become more relevant, obviously the deck is targetable. So more people might be trying to deal with it, whether that's playing Oldhim again, or that's maybe switching to Lexi, or I don't know, something that will target me. I'll have to maybe try to put in some text to try to optimize those matchups a little bit. But otherwise, the deck is still going to remain pretty much the same. Just because it has a really strong rogue matchup, there isn't many rogue decks that I feel threatened by, or that I don't feel like I can play through just because of the power that the deck can put out. But the only other tech card that Levi and I were discussing that I thought might be kind of cool, which he talked about in your video, was the Talisman of Warfare.
Yep.
Just because Lexi is a bad matchup for Briar. So that's something that I actually might consider throwing in the sideboard if Lexi does start becoming a little bit more of a prevalent threat, to kind of weed out like the Briars or something like that.
Sure.
So otherwise, yeah, it's just going to be adaptable to whatever might be trying to target me. But otherwise, it's really not going to change that much, just because my strategy into Starvo is really any different than like it might be into another deck. So take that as you will.
Sure. Same from Mighty Scoop. One more here. What are your thoughts? I mean, he asks if, or he or she asks if Swarming Gloomveil was worth the spot. I mean, that card to me is just cracked out. So I think with Briar, with some of the interactions that you've described with on hit, making embodiment, like those are auras that card creates by itself. So if it does create an embodiment of Earth, it gets go again automatically. So it puts your opponent, I feel, I'm talking for you, but it just puts them in some really, really, really awkward situations, especially like you've said, if you can combine that with a lightning press, it's just off to the races.
Yeah, no, the card is insane. It's not as insane in Briar as it is into like Viserai for something, for example, but the play lines that you can play within Briar are very unique and actually kind of awkward to play around as the opponent. It's a pretty clean replacement for Ball Lightning. Obviously, it's not Ball Lightning. I wish we kind of still had Ball Lightning, but the nice thing about Swarming Gloomveil is it blocks for 3. It's a 0 cost. It's 3 that pretty much always has Go Again. And then there's a lot of cool interactions within the deck. So one of the reasons why I still play Sting of Sorcery is because of Swarming Gloomveil. So you play Sting of Sorcery, it's an aura, so Swarming gains Go Again. You play Swarming. If they don't block the Arcane from the Swarming, it creates an embodiment of
now
Earth,
it hits.
and that puts Swarming Gloomveil up to 4 then. So stuff like that. Same with Chanamon Heroic. Chanamon Heroic's an aura, so that automatically gives Swarming Gloomveil Go Again. The interactions that you can get with Swarming Gloomveil with Revel and Runeblood are actually kind of cool as well, just because they can't block the Thorn afterwards if it hits. Another cool little ruling interaction that people might know that I kept in my back pocket. I didn't have to use it, but I think it's kind of cool. If you have a Force of Nature on board, and again, I'm pretty confident about this ruling. You might want to double check it with.
You're just making your own rules here. We just make our own rules here. This is how he gets top 4.
I have confirmed this with a number of judges, but again, it's a very obscure ruling, so people might obviously people aren't aware of it and they might question it. But if you play an aura, let's say you create a rune chant or something,
okay,
and then you play Force of Nature and you play you attack with Swarming Gloomveil.
Yep.
It comes in for 3. When it hits, it'll create the embodiment of Earth.
Oh, God.
And then, depending upon how you trigger it, Swarming Gloomveil will go up to 4. Now, Force of Nature, how it reads, it says that when an attack hits with greater than its base, you can draw a card.
Yeah.
It recognizes that Swarming Gloomveil hit, and it then recognizes that its attack is now greater than its base, even though it didn't hit when its attack was greater than its base. So you can still draw a card. So it's interactions like that that are really cool and weird.
Yeah, that's nasty.
Again, a little bit more, like a little bit more weird, obscure rulings, but it's great to know. It definitely will catch your opponent off guard, and you can definitely punish people for it if they're not aware. And I wouldn't expect them to be aware of it either, because it's just really weird.
That's so obscure, but it's gross.
So, Swarming Gloomveil, man, it's a great card. I would not. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I primarily always run. I only run Grasp over like Vexing Quillhand or something, just because of that card as well. Like being able to generate the rune chance. You
need to turn that on in a pinch. Yeah,
great. Yeah, super great.
That's cool. The interaction's bananas. I don't see why it wouldn't work either. That's just something that I've never given thought to before. All right, so Kua from Malaysia asks what your approach is to like other matchups like Doriaxes or Dawnblade, Bolton, or Rhinar. Says there's not really a meta where they're at, and kind of wants to know what that's like since everybody kind of plays their own favorite hero.
Yeah. I think one of the best ways to gain experience is, obviously playing the matchup and then just kind of figuring that out. But for me, I've played a lot of those decks. I've always been a person in TCGs where I like to switch around. I like to try different decks. I kind of hop around a lot. I'd say that this is there's been very rare times throughout my careers in TCGs where I've kind of stuck with a deck for a while and really kind of fleshed it out. Briar being one of them. And I'd say Rhinar and Katsu were the other two decks that I play in this game as well, that I feel pretty comfortable with, that I've put a lot of time and a lot of matchup knowledge into as well. But by learning those, you can then start learning how to play into those other decks. So with Briar, for example, when you're playing into something like Rhinar, for example, Rhinar can put out a lot of damage, but he doesn't have any on-hits that really threaten you or that make you want to block him unless you're going to die. The good news is with Briar is that you also threaten a lot of damage, and you threaten on-hits that can threaten more damage. So you're going to probably put him in a blocking situation more frequently than he's going to put you in a blocking situation. And he's probably going to be taking cards out of your hand, so you won't be able to block anyway. So just being able to kind of play a tempo game, but also realize that you're kind of the one in the driver's seat of that game as well. He's going to have to be blocking out. And to be conscientious of this as well, if you're playing into a really good Rhinar player, they could also have a fatigue strategy against you, because Rhinar can fatigue Rune Blades. Again, with Mount Heroic, that is a little bit more difficult into Briar because you kind of can rip through the defense reactions with a Mount Heroic. But it is something to be aware of. If you're not prepared for fatigue strategy and you start realizing that like halfway through the game, that might be a little bit too late. So it's just stuff like that, like having the knowledge of how your deck wants to win. The good thing with Briar is that it's a pretty proactive deck, so you are generally wanting to be the one who's pacing the game or wanting to be in the winning position. So just try to think about that. I think once you try to start like bending the deck to play around other decks, that's when it kind of starts getting weaker. You always want to realize that like you're the powerful deck, right? You're the one who can put out so much damage and so much threats. Yeah, you're Ellen DeGenerate. Like, just go in.
Just do it.
Just do it. But if you do have more questions, like specifically for matchups, feel free to just DM me directly and we can talk about it in more detail. But I think that's just like generally speaking a good way to try to approach matchups as Briar.
Sure. No, that's good. All right, so Sir Archibald and Namkun or Namkun want to both know your take on the Oldhim matchup. I mean, I think an assumption is if Starvo does get hit, Starvo does get banned, it'll kind of allow Oldhim to kind of take back up that mantle of the top guardian in the format. So, I mean, probably testing. You didn't test a lot of Oldhim, I know, just because he's not prevalent. But how would you approach that matchup? Do you stack for big Mount Heroic turns, or is it like chip damage? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, exactly. So the deck, I have tested a good amount into Oldhim and, like I said, OG Bravo and other kind of fatigue control strategies. Generally, your win strategy is going to be setting up for your giant Mount Heroic turns, more so in line with an Exude Confidence. That card absolutely destroys control decks. Like, in a control matchup, Exude Confidence is like gold to me. I try to pitch those away. I save them for any optimal turn that I can really capitalize on it because it's that good. You want to try to set up a Channel Mount Heroic turn with like an embodiment of lightning or something, so you can start with the Exude Confidence at 7. They generally have a really hard time trying to block that, and if they do block with something higher, you have Lightning Press that you can get over it. You have Nimblism that you can use to get over it. You have Bramble Spark that you can use to get over it. You have Force of Nature that you have to get over it. So you always want to be buffing with like a huge Exude, and then following up after that so you can just really lay out the damage. You can go wide enough and tall enough to where they'll run out of ability to block the damage, and that's those turns that you want to just capitalize, where you can just pump through like 15 damage maybe after the fact.
Yeah.
I usually try to side up to like 66 cards also into the Oldhim matchup. So for me, with sideboarding, I always keep my deck at 54 cards in the main board, and then I usually side in 6 cards from my side deck. My side deck is more like a toolbox, right? So I have certain cards that go in for specific matchups, but they're more so like, what do I want a little bit more of in this matchup? So it's like, if I want a little bit more buff, I'll put in Bramble Spark. So it's like, if I want something that's going to give me more control, I'll put in like Command and Conquers or something, right? So into the Oldhim matchup, I'll put in 3 Bramble Sparks, 3 Command and Conquers, 3 Exude Confidence, and then 3 Coax of Commotion. Coax of Commotion kind of just really does well into Guardian matchups because they can't really utilize the Quicken token well, and it expands your play line. Bramble Spark gives you those buffs where you can get over them, because in control matchups, 7 damage really isn't a great break point for you because they can block 7 damage actually pretty efficiently. So I always want to try, if I want to get really big, to get to like 10 damage if minimum with a first attack or something. Command and Conquer, because it's just another threat that you have. And even into Oldhim, people are like, oh, they'll just Crown of Seeds away their arsenal. But it's not in there to a threaten their arsenal. It's in there because it's a threat, and they won't be able to use defense reactions against it.
It's damage.
And then, yeah, it's damage. And then Exude Confidence, which I already talked about. That card's crazy. And then the other thing to consider into Oldhim is they have Blizzard, and then they also have their Ice React. So if you want to be able to maintain a card in your hand ideally, or have a card in arsenal at all times so that you have the extended hand so that you can still play through. I always try to hold the blue in hand or something like that in case they do have the Blizzard. Obviously, there's going to be some times where you just have to play and hope that they don't have the Blizzard for you. But if you can play around it, be conscientious of that. Like, hold on to your blues in your hand, or just hold on to that extra card in your hand just in case you can play around the Ice React. And then sometimes it's even more valuable where if you can extend your turn, but you'll get punished with an Ice React to not get an arsenal, it might be smarter just to pass so you can have that 5th card in your arsenal so you can set up for a more explosive turn. Like, don't be greedy. They give you a lot of time to set up, so set up accordingly. Like, you don't need to rush the game. They'll have their Spinal Crushes maybe, and they might have their Glacials or their Oakenolds or something like that, but Oldhim doesn't have that constant threat that Starvo has. Like in the Michael Hamilton game that I played, if he was on Oldhim, I probably would have felt more comfortable with those awkward hands because I'd have more time to reset my deck or to make the deck a little bit more optimal for the second cycle.
Oldham's just like Starvo, chipping away.
Yeah, you don't have that kind of like pleasure against Starvo because if you don't threaten him, he's going to just threaten you with 10 damage a turn or disruption and all that. So that's why I was kind of like trying to throw out threats so that it didn't feel like he was just punching a baby, even though he was punching a baby. But Oldhim, you don't have to worry about that as much. So, and then also Scaletta. I think having Scaletta is important because you can block the Ice Hammer when you need to so that you can maintain your strong hands. Because the worst thing is when you set up and you have a really strong hand and then they hit you with some really bad disruption and then you lose your heroic or your Channel Mount Heroic or something like that. And then, because essentially, sorry, this is another point. There's a lot that goes into the control. Like
for sure, it's good information.
You have in the Oldhim matchup, you have 4 Channel Mount Heroics because one of them is your Pulse of Candlehold. So don't get rid of your Pulse of Candlehold. Make sure you hold it so you can retrieve another Mount Heroic so you can set up another turn. That's going to be really big. And if you start drawing into awkward hands through the control matchup, like all non-attack action hands or all attack action hands or something like that, don't worry about it. Like, don't just throw away your threats that are going to get blocked out because once you throw them away, you don't get them back. So if you start drawing all attacks like your Ravenous Rabbles or your Scar for Scars or something, pitch them away. Like, don't just throw out attacks if you don't have buffs for them and they're not going to get you any value, because Oldhim can just block for 4 all day and he doesn't care. And you're going to end up in a position where you have like 2 heroics in your deck, right? But you have all you have left are autumn touches, and that's a horrible position to be in. So
right.
Just be conscientious of your resources that you have and the threats that you have, and just really account for like efficient, optimized turns that you know are going to net you a lot of damage or something like that, because that's really the only way you can play through it. And Exude Confidence is your best friend. Just like cherish that card. That was something I was so sad about when I had to throw away that Exude Confidence at Michael Hamilton, when I just had like nothing I could block with, because I'm like, well, there goes
one of them. Yeah, there's one of them.
There goes. So, yeah. But yeah, so there's some information for you about Oldhim.
Nice. Now, Hamilton ran Stalagmite, correct?
He did.
Okay, so does Oldhim, let's say it's more of a mid-rangey, not necessarily fatigue Oldhim, let's say mid-range, Oldhim, does Stalagmite kind of change the matchup a little bit?
Not quite. I actually hate seeing Ramparts way more than Stalagmite.
Okay.
Stalagmite I actually don't care that much about. I don't know if I want to publicly say that, because I don't want people to stop running that against me. But it's
you got your gold
right?
foil. Come on.
The card is annoying. It's not like Ramparts, where Ramparts makes me play differently because I have to play around it. Like, if I have a cool non-attack action chain that I can play, but it's going to cause me to break the chain link, and then they're going to get Ramparts, and they're going to be able to block my Thorn for 2 for free, basically, where they're going to have, they're not going to have to take the physical. That's a really big net loss for me. So it's going to force me to have to play my non-attacks in a less optimized fashion. So Stalagmite just is kind of annoying, and it kind of shuts down my turns. Like against Michael Hamilton, there was one point where he did it, and I had to pitch like a Ravenous Rabble away to attack, and people were like, "Oh, that was so bad. He had to pitch Rabble, like that shut you down." But in my head, I'm like, I'm not doing anything. This Rabble can be there for later in the game.
Yeah,
if
right.
I actually get
if
there,
you get to the second cycle.
Whatever. So.
Okay.
I'll need to test it more, but yeah, I think Ramparts is way more difficult to play around than Stalagmite.
Interesting. Okay. It's good information. Contrarian Husk, who is slowly becoming one of my favorite Discord users, asks, what's your favorite food?
Oh, it's fried chicken all day. That's what I have for dinner tonight.
Loved it.
I fueled on fried chicken, man. That's how you win. Just eat a nice Raising Cane's or I don't know, Popeyes, whatever gets you going. But
Raising Cane's is fantastic. It's so good.
Yeah.
And also now a more serious question, but how do you feel the state of mid-range, or what do you feel about the state of mid-range decks, especially Briar and Runeblade? He says it feels like mid-range decks are kind of pushed through the virtue of not being able to force interaction. Is it time for Blossoming Spellblade to make a comeback?
So like with the question, do you think, they're referring more to like mid-range in a whole? Like, how does mid-range?
Yeah, it seems like he's just saying like, is mid-range taking away from the true nature of Flesh and Blood? Because like a lot of Runeblade especially, like it gets a lot of hate, I think for good reason, from some of the, traditional Flesh and Blood players. A lot of what it feels like is you don't really have much interaction. They kind of just do their thing, and then you like for you against Cody, it's whoever blocks first. So for the first like 3 rounds, you're just taking swings. So do you think that's kind of a problem, or do you think that's kind of just the where the game naturally was going to get through?
So to me, mid-range is like the optimal way of how the game plays, because it's a nice back and forth of like, I'm attacking and I'm blocking. Like, I'm optimizing my plays, I'm being more efficient with the value of my cards, my resources that I have. I'm more of a mid-range temple player, so like Rhinar, Katsu, Briar, all that kind of stuff. I really enjoy those play lines. But it also gives you that variability like that within the chain matchup, where it's like, well, I can't really block this matchup, so I have to just be aggro. Or, with Briar, there aren't really like matchups where you're like, I'm just going to fatigue them, because that's just not really how you win the game. But I really like mid-range. I think that the game right now, I was talking to Levi and Marcus as we were driving down to the calling about this too. It's prone to having these kind of like rock, paper, scissor orientations where there's decks that are really functional and really strong, but then they just have like horrible matchups where they crumple. And then those matchups have those matchups. And that's kind of like where I came in with Briar, where I was like, I can beat Starvo, I can destroy Prism, I can beat Viserai, And then the only
lose
things that
the chain,
I don't want
yeah.
to see, yeah, it's like Chain, Lexi, Oldhim, anything like. And I was like, if I come across those, that would be not likely. But I mean, Chain's likely, but you have those kinds of variabilities, but you still have bad matchups, right? And that's kind of how they've balanced the game. I think they have to be careful with that, just because some people might like that. I don't really like that. I don't like having to go into a game where I sit down and I'm just going to lose because the matchup is that bad, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how they fix that though. That's the problem, because I really like how the game functions. Like I really enjoy the competitive nature and just the matchup sense and the knowledge that you acquire and how you can apply that to the different game states that you play in and how impactful that is. But yeah, if there's any way that they can try to level that out more, but I don't know. I mean, that's so hard to ask. Like I don't even know where to start with that. And then as they keep introducing more heroes into the game, it's just going to be more difficult to manage it. Because if you look at like the current state of the meta, right?
It's pretty good.
Star Wars at the top. It's pretty good. I mean, Star Wars at the top because of just who Starvo is, but Prism is pretty close because of how she can interact with him and how she blows out controls and all the other kind of decks. And then Runeblade's kind of in there that controls her, but she destroys everything else. So it's like if you take one of them out of the game, so like let's say for example Prism, I think Prism is probably the most oppressive deck in the game, where in the sense of that she doesn't allow other decks to really thrive.
I would agree.
Meta. She kind of has a vice grip on them, and I think it's difficult for Prism to try to manage that because they inherently made her extremely weak to other matchups. So she can never be the best deck because she's so easily targetable that if she ever happened to be the best deck, everyone would just play her counters and then she'd get crushed and then she wouldn't be able to win anymore.
She's more or less like the gatekeeper. Like she's only good because Starvo exists. Like if you take Starvo away and it's just Runeblades that are rising up, she goes away completely. Like she has to have that top guardian or top deck like that, a deck similar to that, in order to function and be like a top deck.
Well, she denies control metas from existing.
Right.
Which, I mean, it depends on the kind of player you are. Like I know Marcus, he loves control matchups. He wishes the games. He's like, I'm waiting. We're gonna get our control meta. We're gonna get our control meta. And I'm like,
I thought we had it when Oldhim. I thought we had it when Oldhim got spoiled. I'm like, dude, this is gonna be the slowest shit, and it's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, and I think it was probably possible. I mean, it was very possible, but Prism exists. So
yeah, and
you can see that as a good thing, where there isn't that ability to just dominate a meta like that, or you can see it as an oppressive thing. It just depends on what side that you're on. I mean, I've always played decks that just destroy Prism, so I've never been worried about that.
Yeah.
But I understand her oppressive nature to the game state. So I don't know how this applies in regards to the mid-range, but I think it's how the game itself is inherently designed. You need all the functioning parts for it to balance itself out, but intrinsically within those parts, there's imbalance. And it's a card game. Like that's
it's gonna happen.
How it is. And I think this game is extremely balanced, more so than any other card game that I've played.
I would agree.
But I personally don't enjoy the fact of how this meta is kind of restrictive on the decks that you can play that will keep you at a high competitive level. So
I think Starvo. The only problem that I have, and I've expressed this before, I think Starvo was kind of a design miss, but that's for a later video. But yeah, I agree with it. It's like if you pick up Dorinthia right now, which somebody in this recording tried Dorinthia at the beginning of this meta and it didn't work. But you pick her up right now and it's like you can't do anything. Like, I mean, I get it. Like Dorinthia was meant to be that like learner deck, like, hey, this is how you learn, and now she's like a thing of the past. But there are some heroes that you just cannot play. If you, of course, tabletop playing with your friends, you can play anybody. It's all fun, right? Every hero is fun. Everybody got new toys, Neverfest. It's cool. But you go to the calling, there's like 4 heroes that you can just cross off your list. Like, I'm not bringing that person because I cannot win based on who else is showing up. So I get what you're saying there, and I do agree to an extent. I happen to not mind the rock, paper, scissors mentality because I think with the rock, paper, scissors matchup, it also leads to 3+ top decks, which I like a game where you have Like Cody easily could have won with Chain had he had a different matchup, right? Tyler or Fino could have won that last game had he remembered his third tunic counter, right? Hamilton won with Starvo. If you had a different draw in the bracket and didn't run into Hamilton, you could have won with Breyer. So at the same time, we could have had 4 heroes all with decent chances of winning a major tournament, which is pretty cool. Not many. Yeah.
I was gonna say that's just inherent with card games, right? Like that's why you play a card game, because there is that variable nature in it that kind of evens the playing field, right? And for me, I think one of the great things for this event personally is that I feel like the losses that I had weren't really relevant to any play mistakes that I made, but were just because of that variance or variability that happened to come into the game, which I'm fine with. Like for me as a player, I'm content with that, because if I know that I played really well,
you didn't misplay,
and there wasn't like something significant, that made me lose the game, like missing my third tunic counter or something like that, then I'm proud. But I think that I also think it's just hard because we don't have a lot of data for the game, right? There's no like online platform where we're able to register all these heroes, and the best players typically tend to skew to whatever the best deck is in the meta. So we don't ever actually really get a realistic view of what happens if the best players are playing Rhinar or the best players are playing like Dorinthia or something like that.
But it's like all the chain wins that come out of like the Northeast are all just Hyperloops guys that continuously keep winning with chain.
Yeah, and so it's like we have a snapshot, but we don't actually have the full picture. And I don't think we will until, if that ever happens. And I don't even know if that will happen, but that's like a goal that Levi and I kind of have, where we want to try to put out some content where we're going in more in depth of a high level analysis of these lower tier decks, or what people would deem as lower tier, because I think a lot of it is just either misinformation, or there's just not a lot of knowledge about it, or just people haven't put in the time to really like put out high level examples of what the deck can function or how it can play. So I'd love to see if more high level players switched off of these best decks to just see what would happen. Like Breyer was the dark horse, right? But I still think Breyer is like tier 1.5 easily, and I just don't think people were giving her credit or acknowledging her still. But I don't think there's any reason why she couldn't still be at a higher tier within the bracket.
I mean, you proved that, all right, so Super Pants asks, is there any hope for an arcane-based Breyer deck that involves like Flicker, Wisp, and other cards? Said maybe a dumb question, but have never seen anything out there. Flicker Wisp, baby. That's a majestic.
Unfortunately, I think that dream died with Ball Lightning. I had worked on a list like that when Breyer's early conception. That was one of my early variations of the Lightning Breyer list. So I was running like Rites of Lightning, Flicker Wisp, Sting of Sorcery, Arcanic Shockwave, like all that kind of stuff. And that deck was sick. Like you could do some crazy plays with Flicker Wisp and Sting of Sorcery and Ball Lightning, where you're just threatening like
17 arcane
damage, right? Yeah, like crazy arcane damage, and it was so fun. But Ball Lightning really facilitated a lot of those play lines that would amplify your
Makes
arcane.
Sense.
So I'm not saying it's not possible. I know that there might be like, I know some people have talked about like a generic Runeblade Breyer variant where you're playing more just like the arcane, like Arcanic Shockwave, or is that Arcanic Shockwave?
Arcanic Crackle.
Whatever the Arcanic Crackle, yeah, that one. Or like
Arcanic Shockwave's a card too, though.
That is the card. That's the Elemental Runeblade one. That basically kind of does the same thing.
Crackle is just like deal one arcane. It's like Baby Vexing Malice.
Yes, or Vexing Malice, yeah, stuff like that. I think it's just harder for Breyer because, like, you have to kind of go through a certain play pattern to optimize the deck, whether that's playing 2 non-attack actions to get go again. It's not like Chain, where you can like just shackle and then play a Vexing Malice and you're doing the 2 split and then you can come in with Thorn and stuff like that. I think Breyer tends to be more favored with the physical damage accompanied by the arcane. If there is a way to do it, I'd love to mess around with it. But like I said, unfortunately, I think with Ball Lightning dying, that dream also kind of died.
That was a big tool, yeah.
So, yeah.
Brad Tash, how do you deal with all non-attack action hands, or I guess all attack action hands?
Yeah. So I knew this question was in there, so I kind of waited to expand upon like the Michael Hamilton thing. I touched a little bit on it with the control as well, but with Breyer, from my experience, there's about 4 brick variations that happen. Obviously, there might be more, and within those bricks, there's multiple splits that happen within them. But the main ones would be the all attack action hand, the all non-attack action hand, the all red hand, because usually when you start getting all red hands, that's going to be indicative of following up with either
all blues
blue hand or more blues than reds. Right, and so how the deck orientates itself at the beginning of the games you start drawing, you can start kind of getting an idea of how your deck might be stacked. Like obviously it's not guaranteed, but the probability lies within that. So if you start seeing a lot of attack action hands, you can start guessing that, okay, I'm probably going to be coming up to a lot of non-attack action hands realistically. So you can either start arsenaling attacks to try to maintain them for when you draw into your non-attack action hands. Or what's another good way of trying to maintain that is having an arsenal so that you can draw into your Tome of Harvest and hope that you can then pop the Tome of Harvest to try to fix your hands. That's a really great resource, and you can actually see me doing that in the Michael Hamilton game. I think I played like 3 Tome of Harvests because I was trying to cycle through my deck and reset my hands. So that's a great resource to have. Another one would be if you like draw all reds and you have a Chanamon Heroic, and you know you're not seeing like an Earth Blue, which would happen to me as well. That can also be a brick, because then your Mount Heroic is just kind of like, it's literally a rock that's just sitting in your hand or your arsenal that you can't really get rid of. So that's another potential brick that can happen. And if you're in that situation, you need to think, is it more valuable for me to block with my Mount Heroic for 4 block than it is to maybe just have it sit in my hand or arsenal and wait till I get the blue? So your deck actually gives you quite a bit of information, because as you're drawing through it, you can start kind of orientating the probability of what's going to be coming up next. And how you fix that kind of relies on what the matchup is, how much time you have to fix it, and then how you can prepare into your most optimized draws. So for example, like let's say I have a Gorganian Tome in my hand. This play line actually happened to me one time at Locals. I had a Gorganian Tome in hand, and I had a Ravenous Rabble in hand, and then I had a Mount Heroic. And I was attacked, and was that all? No, and then there was maybe one other card, but it wasn't a blue earth. And my opponent attacked me, and I could have blocked, but I thought, okay, well, why not? What if the possibility that
I hit the
have a blue on top? Because I haven't seen a blue in a bit, but that could be something that happens. I'm like, do I want to block with the Mount Heroic at this point, or should I hold it just in case that happens? And I chose to hold it. So then I played Ravel, and at the Sam Daniel special, I reviewed the blue earth.
I'm like, information.
Play Gorganian Tome, draw a card, play Mount Heroic, create Embodiment of Lightning, Arsenal, and then you set up for the huge blowout turn.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that, where you just start gaining that game sense or the potential possibilities to optimize your play lines. It's complicated. Like it's going to take time to practice that, and as you start encountering more awkward hands, you have to start trying to think about, like, do I just throw it away to block? Because a lot of times that's the easy answer. It's like, I have a bad hand, just block, and then wait until I get a good hand where I can do something, but always maintain the arsenal. That's like the biggest thing. Once you start bricking, always have a card in the arsenal so that when you draw that Tome of Harvest, you can optimize that and cycle through your deck and then kind of reset the play pattern. So that's my best advice for that. I need more practice in that too. I'm going to be practicing that, like I said, with Levi. I'm going to have him stack my deck poorly so I can kind of start trying to play through that. You have Sonata too, which can throw you off, because once you Sonata, you're going to cycle your deck right, and it's going to reset everything, and then you're kind of playing into new territory. So keep that in mind also. There's a lot of times I'll bottom Sonatas with E-Strikes, or I'll just save it in hand to pitch it so I can Thorn, because I want to guarantee that I have a card, because there's nothing worse than banking on getting a card from Sonata and then not getting it and then being punished for that. So sometimes, I know it's hard, reduce the urge to play the Sonata as soon as you have it in hand, because it might actually just be better as a card than it is as like just a non-attack action card that you play when you get nothing from it.
Sure.
So.
All right, sir. I got one final question for you.
All right.
All right, and then we're going to wrap it up. Katsu Scrub wants to know, where'd you get the style? We got to talk about the pink jacket. I feel like it's what made you famous, or it contributed to the fame, the people's champion. This dude rolling up to the top tables wearing a pink jacket. I'm kind of somewhat disappointed it's not being rocked now. I'm sure it's being framed and it's going to be lifted into like the Fab Hall of Fame somewhere. Like James White contacted you about donating it. But yeah, let's talk about the jacket.
So Yeah, when I read that question, I was like, does he mean my play style or does he mean my actual style?
Dude, I don't care about play style at this point.
Yeah. So I guess a little bit about me is that I'm a musician, actually. That's my background. I'm a jazz musician, but I do hip hop, R&B, and stuff like that. That's like my favorite kind of music. So a lot of my style came just from my music attire, or just stuff that I would wear at shows, or just how I like to dress. So I mean, I like streetwear stuff. I mean, I like just normal business casual stuff, whatever whatever environment I'm in. But a lot of that particular clothing comes from a store in Canada called Bibisama, which is Bibisama, and they do like streetwear, anime, like Japanese styled stuff. Really clean, really sick stuff. Anyone should recommend. I recommend anyone check it out. I think their store has actually been kind of closed for a bit because they've had some warehouse issues, but they're going to be opening up again real soon. So go ahead. Next time I'm at an event, everyone should be wearing their pink jackets.
I was going to say, this place's stock is going to just skyrocket.
I should get them to sponsor me. So
that'd be so sick.
Yeah. But that's that for that style, and I appreciate everyone for admiring the drip, and
it was
I hope
incredible.
I thought that was like probably one of my favorite things is the next day when on the Flesh and Blood website they had the picture of me at the table, and they said something like Sam Dando representing Briar in style, and I'm like, wow, even LSS is recognizing the fashion.
Dude, game respect game.
Yeah, James White out here. He's just like, mad respect to the Briar player.
He's gonna show up. He's gonna show up at that banquet at the ProQuest in that pink jacket.
Yeah,
how
great.
Incredible would that be? All right, well,
awesome.
Thank you for taking the time to record this vid here. I just want to say, playing you, knowing you and everything, no one deserves the success as much as you. So formally, I want to congratulate you on the top 4. It was just awesome kind of following along with the journey. I'm disappointed that I wasn't there in person. Hopefully, like I said, when you win Worlds, I'll be on your rail there cheering you along, and then we can record another hour-and-a-half video here and post on the channel. But congratulations. It was just a blast watching you play here. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
Of course. I want a big thank you to you guys, especially. I want to do a huge thank you to my sponsors, MinMax, who a lot of you guys who were at the calling were able to go to the vendors who were there, who was MinMax, and buy stuff, trade stuff with them, get to know them. I heard so many people like, man, those guys are so cool. They're so nice. They really are. Like, I highly recommend if you are in the area, please come to MinMax, come play with us, buy stuff from them. They're so nice. They're super nice guys, super reasonable. They got a lot of great product. And then obviously my boys Marcus and Levi, who were with me through the whole journey. I play so many games with them. I test with them all the time, and they were there watching me to the end as well. Levi, again, was held there forcibly against his will, as he mentioned in his video. But I wouldn't have it any other way. And then also just all the new friends that I made through this. And even now, everyone who messages me, I'm sorry if I don't get back to you right away. I'm just super busy with life and stuff, but I read all of your messages. I really appreciate it. And I always try to respond when I can. So please keep messaging me. Please keep asking me for questions. You can always find me in like the Briar Discord chat on. I'm Notorious BLT, and you'll know me right away because it's my Ellen DeGeneres Briar token picture. So please message me. And again, like, this community is fantastic. Like, I want this. If anything, I want the community to keep growing. I keep telling people, like, I don't do this because I'm like trying to get recognition or anything like that. I just want to help the community get better, and I want other people to grow, because that's something within this game. There's kind of like this, and again, nothing against like the high level players or anything, but there's kind of like this elite sector where they just kind of hide. They don't share all the information.
Patreon,
or
baby,
stuff for themselves. It's like, I don't believe in that. Like, I want us all to get better, because I'm only one person. I can only play so many games. If you can teach me something, or if you can take something that I did and make it better and let me know, then we can all get better that way, right?
For sure.
So let's just keep being a great community. Like, let's keep encouraging people to get into the game. And there's so many Magic people who are at SGCCon who came over and were like, what is this game? This is so cool. And they just
awesome.
wanted to, and they bought Blitz decks or whatever. So like, we're growing, right? Yeah, and so let's foster the new people into the game and make it a great environment for them. And Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to wherever this is going to go. And if this is it, then I'm really happy for it. But thanks for all the support. I really appreciate it. And represent Chicago. We got some games.
Dude, we did well.
Chicago's gonna be here, dude.
We did
everyone
well.
From Chicago did really well.
I know.
So
love to
that's
see
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those of you that stuck around or made it to the end of this video, if you want, if we didn't get to any of your questions, or maybe if something popped up as you were watching, post a link in the, or post a question in the chat, or in the comments section. Sam or somebody on the team will get back to you guys, and we'll make sure that we get his opinion. It's not just going to be me answering random Briar questions. So we'll make sure we bring that to his attention so he can answer there as well. Like I said, the link to the deck list will be in the chat as well. If you have any questions, comments, anything, feel free to reach out. But until next video, on behalf of Sam, this has been Ryan with the Roundtable of Wraith. And until next time, see you guys later.
See you guys.